Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been fixing for a fight about the southern border ever since President Biden took office. And this week, a battle over whether or not the federal government is allowed to remove razor wire installed by the state of Texas threw a lot of gasoline on that fire. After a lawsuit from the Department of Justice, the Supreme Court basically said federal border patrol agents are well within their rights to step in and remove the razor wire. And Governor Abbott has responded by essentially taunting the federal government by continuing to have the Texas National Guard and state troopers lay more wire. And now this back and forth is sparking a whole lot of casual references to civil war in the right-wing circles.
Basically, the Supreme Court has told Texas, your choices are be invaded or secede.
The federal government would come in, and some people would say, well, that's the seeds of a civil war. Is that what you want? Where does this end?
That Supreme Court decision that was made has now put the federal government at war with the state of Texas.
Joining me now is former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who is the founder of the Political Action Committee, Power of People. Well, you have been, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. You have been very vocal about this, and I thought it was so important to explain to people what's going on here. Because one of the things that struck me is that it's not just an issue back and forth with the Border Patrol. We're talking about Donald Trump is now calling on Republican governors to call on their own National Guard members to help Abbott. It's escalating. How concerning is that to you?
Well, it's really clear that Republicans, especially Trump and those who have enabled him, never had any interest in solving the problem. In fact, they are focusing on creating a bigger problem because cynically they believe that this is to their political advantage going into November. We've seen President Biden bend over backwards about as far as you can politically to meet every single one of their demands, at least brought to him by Senate Republicans, agreeing to, in his own words on Friday, to shut down the border, which is something you might expect Donald Trump to say. But that deal doesn't go far enough for them, and Trump has ordered his lieutenants to reject it so that he can run on this in November. But it's not just the politics or the rhetoric or the policy. We're talking about human lives. The people who are losing them are those very migrants that Greg Abbott, our governor, has mused about shooting and said that he wouldn't, only because he'd be arrested by the Biden administration. They're dying in record numbers. And Jen, these are women, these are young children who are being swept up in the currents of the Rio Grande River, who are dying of exposure and dehydration in the Chihuahuan Desert. And let's remember that on August 3rd, 2019, somebody who was triggered by this rhetoric of invasion and secession and insurrection and these migrants were trying to get us, walked into a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, and slaughtered 23 innocent human beings. So what's happening right now could not be more dangerous. And this is a moment where we need leadership. We need to remember our values and who we are as a country. And we're counting on President Biden to do the right thing.
I want to talk about that rhetoric because you've raised this, and this is such an important thing for people to understand. I mean, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick saying Texas is being, quote, invaded by murderers, terrorists, and rapists. That is some heated, escalatory, pretty outrageous language. You just alluded to this, but talk to us more about what the impact of language like that. How do people hear that? What could happen at the border and in some of these communities where people hear that and think they should act?
It's absolutely clear that we've got legitimate concerns and challenges at the border. The problem is when Abbott and Dan Patrick and Donald Trump and the Republican leadership in Congress exacerbate those problems and create chaos and confusion, it makes it really hard to identify those who could very well threaten the United States, who are in the vast minority of those asylum seekers and refugees who are seeking to cross. Furthermore, as you point out, this kind of rhetoric is inciting these dead-ender Confederate dreamers who are coming to Texas with weapons, who are promising to shoot and to kill people. And this isn't just me saying it. Follow my feed on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, and you'll see them responding to our tweets, promising that they're coming to Texas to shoot people. That's not an empty threat. Look at what happened in Buffalo. Look at what happened in El Paso. These white nationalist terrorists are taking their cues not from the extreme or the fringe of the internet, but by elected leaders like Greg Abbott or Donald Trump. That's why I'm hoping that President Biden will remind us of who we are at our best. We're a country of immigrants. We can find safe, legal, orderly pathways for people to come here the right way, to do better for themselves, and certainly to do better for all of us. And he must meet Greg Abbott at this showdown and reiterate what the Supreme Court has already decided, that the federal government has supremacy at the border on immigration policy, and restore what we know to be true about this country, that those immigrants make us stronger by their very presence. And certainly we don't want to see them die or be killed by these unhinged right-wing terrorists. We want to get back to the order, the safety, the control that we are totally capable of. But it's going to take that presidential leadership, which, by the way, Jen, he is free to exercise now. He's done everything he can to try to strike a bipartisan deal. Republicans won't work with him. He will go it alone.
Let me ask you about that, because one, that's absolutely, let me just double tap on that. There is a bipartisan deal that a number of conservative Republicans have said is a great deal that Donald Trump and others are stopping. But let me ask you about something you've talked about, which is federalizing the National Guard. Not everybody's for that, just to state clearly. Why do you think that's something the president should do? And are you concerned about any of the potential drawbacks, like, say, if someone like Trump is elected, he might see that as a precedent?
In 54, the Supreme Court orders the integration of public education in America with Brown versus Board. In 57, Governor Faubus in Arkansas defies a Supreme Court order, uses the state guard to keep those young African-American children from going to Little Rock High School. President Dwight D. Eisenhower federalizes the Guard and actually sends in the 101st Airborne as well to make sure that that Supreme Court decision is upheld and honored. Today, you have another extremist governor in Greg Abbott who's defying a Supreme Court order, defying the Constitution, defying the President of the United States, and using 10,000 members of the state guard to block federal Border Patrol agents from doing their job, which, by the way, Jen, is to apprehend those who cross in between ports of entry, to detain them, to deport them back to the country from which they came if they don't qualify for parole or the ability to stay in this country, and also to save the lives of those migrants who right now are dying and drowning in the Rio Grande River. If he's not going to follow the law, then it is up to the president to make sure that the law is followed by federalizing the Guard. I know that that is a big step for the president to take. I know that folks don't want to inflame the situation, but Jen, what I've seen at every turn after busing migrants and deploying these drowning devices, putting razor wire under the river, and now openly flirting with secession, is that if you do not confront Greg Abbott, he's going to continue to escalate. It's time for the president to take control of this. I know he wants to. I know that ultimately he will, but it benefits when people around this country provide that public pressure for him to do the right thing, and I'm confident that he will.
Thank you, Beto O'Rourke, for being so outspoken, for explaining on Twitter and other platforms, as you said, what exactly is really happening here. And I really appreciate you joining us this afternoon as well. And coming up, some big news